Okay, I just want to first apologize to anybody that has been following along. I appreciate anybody that has watched or enjoyed or found some use or commented to the videos. Again, I do apologize. There's been no updates at all. Some life changes happening here, so I figured I would give you an update on this completed Tamiya Super Shot, or I guess Super Hotshot. I think that's the revised name for it on the re-release. This is the re-release. And I just wanted to go over quickly, as best I can, some of the things that I tried to make this one unique. First off, we could see the reservoir shocks. I do believe they're still available. I'll try to have the links to what I can find out from my notes as I purchase this stuff, so you'd know if you really wanted to make a clone of this thing, you'd be able to. Okay, so we have the shocks. The wheels, the aluminum wheels, you may not be able to get anything that looks quite like that unless you go on eBay. Just, type in vintage aluminum wheel or new old stock aluminum wheel. Those were imported, I believe, from Japan ages ago when hot shots were, I guess, still in their first release. So somewhere back in 86, around there, I want to say. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's around there. So they were just any of the Tamiya cars that fit the three-hole hubs. That's what these were for. Available in wide rears and narrower fronts. So that's probably the only thing that you really couldn't get. And the other things you might have to make, obviously, that's part of the fun of it, is to do the mods. So in the profile here, we can also see that the wires, I went out of my way to try to do the brushless wires as neat as possible. So I could zoom in a little bit. You could see uh, that they are drilled and put in that section. There is a void right above the battery holder area that will allow for you to do that. The only thing I guess I would warn you is that it's going to end up being hardwired to the speed control. So it's going to make it quite a challenge, if not impossible, to fit connectors in there somewhere. I don't think there's enough room for connectors and the wiring. So those have been hardwired straight to the speed control inside there. And I wouldn't recommend overtaxing your system on this, such an enclosed chassis. You do see the vent that's just ahead of the driver on the cowl area. So eventually we will make a hole in that cover over that access panel where the body pin goes. So that would be right over here. And we'll try to get some kind of air pulling in or out from there, I guess, whichever way it's better to wire the fan for the speed control in. Anyway, so, and as well, so on the profile here we have, I just used some solder. Anyway, I'm not exactly sure the pronunciation of that, but that's what we use to hold the netting on the roll cage there, just to make it a little neater. I think the factory manual calls for tie wraps, which isn't a bad look. It's just that I guess this feels a little more scale. So they're just twisted and a little bit of not hot glue, a little bit of CA glue to just hold the twisted part together. When you rotate it around, you'll be able to see it a little better. I think that covers most of the profile. The rear wing was intentionally left larger. I try when I cut out these bodies, my take on it is leave as much as possible when you cut these things out. That way, if you decide you want a little bit different look, you have it. I felt like this was maybe a free way to get a more cartoon type of look out of the wing. But of course, you're going to see those lines regardless. So I may not go that route. I may just trim it on factory, or if you add maybe another plastic sheet on either end of the wing here. This is where I was referencing. So let me rotate it now. We'll go towards the back. Here you can see the wires a little bit better. I'll try to zoom in now that I have this angle. So just 3 holes, equidistant. I just try to make them as neat as possible rather than the stock location where they come out. It just looks a little messy. It starts to look a little cramped by the rear sway bar, in my opinion. So this is what we came up with that. So as we come around to the back, We're going to see the rear shock tower. That's just a very inexpensive stick-on carbon fiber vinyl, just to dress up the rear of the Super Shot a little bit more. Then we have the brake light. I hope to eventually have that wired in. I don't know if there's enough room in this chassis. I highly doubt it to put any type of controller box, but I'm hoping that there's some way to tap into the circuit for the speed control to do that. Again, I'm not exactly sure. It might be okay to just leave it lit all the time. That might not look too bad. Just put some type of, I'm not sure if it's a resistor or a diode for that. My knowledge of that aspect has long since gone. The high school days, I was more apt to do the research and do that, but maybe we'll get that running. I hope to. I think it'll dress up the back here if that lights up red. And of course, just this is just from a fog light or a driving light from the crawler scene, the 1/10 scale. You see a lot of pieces like that available. So they're not too tough to get. You just spray a little bit of clear red and do the inside of the housing with maybe like a chrome paint pen. That's what I did. And when you light it up, it'll look pretty much like a regular brake light. And then the little tow hook in the back, again from the crawler scene. It's just something to dress up the back. I feel like the Hotshot and Super Shot series deserve an all-out attempt, because it's just such a great looking buggy that Tamiya made, in my opinion. So on this side, we see the efforts that we made for the power wire. I can get a little obsessive over trying to make the power wire come in and be very, very neat looking. This comes from the parts tree. I'll try to get a zoom in of that. This just holds the wire down a little bit, this pivoting plastic piece right here. I'll try to zoom in on that before the end of the video. That just holds that in, keeps it looking nice and neat. We cut out a little extra notch out of the Lexan body. That is goes against what I normally do. I usually try not to cut out any extra, but I couldn't see any way of making it nice and neat with this and have that rest. It tends to push up the body right there if you leave it like that. At any rate, okay, so that takes care of this side. And so then as we rotate, we'll see, the next thing I guess we'll talk about is the front. So most obvious things, probably the drive shafts and the lack of the sway bar mount. There is no front sway bar on this car. I did that again for aesthetics. A lot of my cars, they're mostly aesthetic driven, performance second, because most of my cars are not runners. They're just built for the shelf, oftentimes built with electronic speed controls, batteries, motors, and then they sit for display. I do have some runners, but I just find that the cars get ruined. I don't know if I'm a bad driver or careless or what's the story, but I just found that I've wrecked way more RCs than I was happy about after putting all this time and effort. So, you know, we may have a basher here and there in the fleet, but most of them are designed just for looks and shelf queens and that type of thing. So on the front here, speaking of the sway bar, you'll see the sway bar mount has been cut off. I try to do it as neatly as possible. I just couldn't see, if I wasn't going to run a sway bar, why you would have those mounts coming through the nose. Again, aesthetics. I think it makes for a lot cleaner look on the nose there without it. This car, again, is never going to see the track. It's probably never even going to see the dirt. So I felt that was a good trade-off for that. And then also then on the front, I had misordered these. I don't know what they're called. Steering uprights, I want to say. Anyway, I'll try to put the proper name for it in the description as well. But you could see these red anodized pieces, again, mostly chosen for looks. They were from a different car altogether. Offhand, I don't know the one that it's for. But what it did was it changed the offset. It changed the offset of the track width ever so slightly. And then the universals that I had were not long enough at that point. So it was the typical situation where, yeah, it works, but as soon as you get a little air or the suspension droops all the way, the dog bones would bind up, these drive shafts would bind up, drop out, pop out, and the like. So even though I don't run them, I usually do test them. And when I noticed that, I realized that we had to make the drive shafts longer. So it's a good little tip. I mean, I'm definitely not the inventor of it. You could see online, there may even be some tutorials online how to do it. But basically, that's just some aluminum rod that is pre-drilled. It's much easier to get one that has a hole in it per se. I don't think they form it by actually drilling it. So that's probably a misnomer that I'm using. But anyway, that's an aluminum rod. And I believe I was able to find the diameter of the shaft, find the diameter of the rod, and it's very close. You can get it, you can order it so it's a nice tight fit. And when you slide that in, that's just all JB welded in there. And I have yet to have a problem. Again, how much real world testing has been done? Very little. But I would bet you'd be okay with that. Then we just turned the ends of it to give it a nice gentle slope. And I thought it was a little bit of a nod to the heavy duty drive shafts that you saw on the original Hotshot, those nice thick diameter drive shafts that they look great on that car, I think. So just a little nod to that, dresses up the front a little bit with those. The vent that we see on the hood, again, just to allow the speed control to vent out. I don't have a hole in the plate yet, the access plate on the bottom beneath that, but the speed control is directly below that. So it would ventilate if you put a hole in that plate or chose to run it without the plate. Again, not practical for off-road use, but I mostly run these cars very minimally, if at all. Then we have the wing buttons at the rear top by the rear wing. And the only thing in retrospect, I think I would have chosen silver instead of the gunmetal. I didn't realize how dark these were going to be. So at any rate, that's the only thing I would change on this so far. And what else could I tell you? Oh, yes, of course, the roof panel. Roof panel is a stock roof panel from the Hotshot. You could use either Hotshot or Super Shot, doesn't matter. But I thought instead of having those tie wraps hold that on, I always thought that looked absolutely atrocious from a cleanness standpoint. So what we did was there's just two brackets inside there. You can kind of see it if I hold it this angle right like this. So there's two brackets that just pass from the one bar here to here. So then we have a bracket that comes up and over, and that's what you bolt your roof into. So you could do that whether or not you put a hole in the roof or not. I always felt like on these cars you really couldn't see the driver that well from so many angles. And most of the viewing you do of your car is usually above it. So I thought to myself, I spent all that time trying to paint this guy, and you can barely see him. So I figured make a hole in the roof, and it kind of reminded me of the hole they had in the Kyosho Ultima. So it's a nod to Kyosho Ultima by having a hole in the roof as well. Okay, so that's pretty much everything about it. The only other thing that I would have to show you, I guess you can kind of see it from the front here, is you'll notice this little tiny lip right here. So what we did was we put carbon fiber plate, a very thin one, underneath. So it's captured by the two stock screws here and a very tiny screw here that threads actually right into the carbon. So if you do it carefully, it will grab. Because I did not trust double-sided tape or anything like that to hold this. So I'll try to get a different view for you right now so you could see the reason behind that piece of carbon. You might be able to catch it like this. Okay, no. So let's go up and go from the top view and see what we can do. There, this was basically the reason behind that was just to highlight the Tamiya logos. Should I say logos? It's the Tamiya lettering on the bumper. So that gives you an idea of what's involved with that. And that just allows us to put any type of sticker underneath to highlight that as you wish. think that's about it. Call this mods edition done. See if I could rotate it for you while we're on the top view. I just put a little bit of red hardware here and there. No, nothing big. So try to dress up the front a little bit. You get a better idea of what the roof looks like. Just replace the cross pieces for the roll cage with little pieces of aluminum. Nothing too crazy about that either. It's just, you know, the only warning I might give you is if you do attempt to do that modification with the roof panel, it's very thin aluminum, so you're going to have to really be patient. And I would recommend having an extra one on hand before you try that. And tape it out, mark it out. I used a Dremel and a file and is able to get that. Again, it's not difficult. It's more time consuming than it is difficult. And that's about it. And there you could see there's a carbon panel beneath that vent that we put there on the front. So eventually that'll get a hole cut in that, allow the speed control to breathe a little bit. Okay, that wraps this one up. All right, thanks for watching.